Thank you to Hertzer for the opportunity to discuss our research. Karina, Andrew, and I aim to document and gather insights about emergency remote teaching and learning online from two of the largest disciplines, accounting and business information systems, in the business school at the University of Sydney, commencing with insights from educators and students. So it really is a cross-disciplinary research study. We'd also like to thank the University of Sydney Accounting Foundation for our research grant. COVID-19 has forced a radical shift in teaching and learning, with many of us now familiar with Zoom and Microsoft Teams delivery teaching modes. Our study has captured insights from educators and students on their experiences in not only transitioning to online learning, but what practices, for instance, have been made by educators that are perceived to be effective and should be retained post the emergency transition to online teaching and learning. This study has also obtained insights from business school leaders and industry practitioners that have implications for the future of business education and what graduate qualities are sought after. The move to emergency remote teaching due to COVID-19 provides a disruption to business as usual and a large-scale transition to online learning. It's thus imperative to understand what this all means as we go beyond the short-term response and how this experience is reshaping business education. This is not only a time to rethink and redesign our teaching, but also an opportunity to consider how best to prepare our graduates for the disruptive workplaces. How adaptable are we, and what pedagogical approaches work best? What are the implications of online learning and teaching for the long term? It's important to note up front our preference is to use the term emergency remote online teaching and learning as opposed to online teaching and learning, as we know from prior literature that online education has been around for ages and emanates from careful instructional design and planning. In contrast, emergency remote teaching was a temporary shift of instructional delivery to alternate delivery modes due to COVID-19. We're now well beyond the emergency stage, and our research aims to understand the impact of emergency remote online teaching and learning. We used a mix of qualitative and quantitative research methods, and we completed the data collection in 2020 in semesters 1 and 2. We conducted student and educator surveys across the two disciplines. We looked for deeper insights in student focus groups and interviews with educators, business school leaders, and practitioners from organisations that employ our graduates. Now over to Angela to take you through some key insights from educators and students.
Thank you, Janine. Let's start with insights from educators. Interestingly, we found educators were most concerned with online assessments and that there was more work involved in almost every aspect of teaching online as compared to face-to-face. It was encouraging to see that educators benefited and were supported most by their colleagues, which showed that the crisis brought us together. It was also interesting to note that 62% of educators changed how they delivered in semester 2 as a result of the learnings from semester 1. Many recognise that the survival mode has passed. So how do we as educators transition to the new way of teaching without the time and resources needed to upskill ourselves? Overall, educators perceived online delivery was less effective in meeting learning outcomes, communication, and in achieving a sense of community. It was interesting that 53% of educators perceived online was less effective in preparing students for future work. We asked questions across the 6 themes listed at the bottom. A number of quotes also support the key findings. Educators suggested that they will keep a number of useful aspects. Many said the online mode prompted them to think more about the student cognitive load and student experience, in addition to mastering new technologies. Challenges included the lack of engagement, making it exhausting to teach rather than energizing. A real problem was the visibility of students and issues with group work. Connection and engagement with students is hard without seeing their faces. There is a perception that educator workload has increased. In response to educator efforts to transition, we found that the majority of students had to prepare differently and were highly engaged with the materials. But how effective was this engagement? What did the students say was effective? Breakout rooms, Q&A Zooms, and working on shared documents. We need to focus more on how we are using these options to encourage engagement. This is another opportunity for educators to think carefully about their teaching practice and design of classroom activities. Further views, as you can see here on the effectiveness, found that the convenience overrides the perception from a majority of students that there is less participation, less effective communication, and less sense of community. "25 students gave us deeper insights in the areas discussed during focus groups. More emphasis here on employability skills, personal feelings, and challenges. Students reported that they had developed a number of new skills that they believe will assist them in future careers. And we will talk more about this when discussing the insights from practitioners. Now I'll hand over to Karina to discuss insights from leaders and practitioners.
Thank you very much, Angela. Interviews with business school leaders focused on their experiences and transition to working remotely and managing and leading their teams. We compiled the key findings under 4 themes. I actually made a mistake. They felt trust was the most important factor to ensure a successful transition and that communication and consistent messaging was key. Leaders also suggested the teaching model is up for grabs and we need to rethink our priorities to maintain high quality education. We interviewed practitioners on their experience of working remotely and the skills they perceived are crucial for their current and future employees. Independence is an essential skill. They felt junior staff needed more micromanaging because online mentoring was less effective. In contrast, working with existing staff was easier as the trust and knowledge were already established. The other skills required are no different to those normally expected. However, we see more emphasis on resilience and analytical mindset and business acumen. These key findings prompted us to ask, what do they mean for us and the future of business education? We recommend some high-level guiding principles that could assist us in building more sustainable education. We now have a unique opportunity for innovation in the new normal. Our focus should be in designing more experiential teaching and learning frameworks to guide us in preparing more agile and resilient graduates to succeed in the dynamic world. As we have seen, the social factor was deemed essential. Hence, we need to revisit the ways in which we encourage student participation and engagement. We still operate on a traditional semester-long model, and this is an opportunity to revisit policies and bring more flexibility. Specifically, we should pay more attention to cognitive load and leverage more technological developments to achieve the best learning outcomes. COVID-19 showed us that significant change in pedagogy requires proper planning and appropriate resources and workload considerations to ensure the sustainability of educational practices. We also found that many educators are great in a face-to-face delivery, but they might need support and training to succeed in their new educational practices. Lastly, with new educational models, we have to move to new and more holistic mechanisms for assurance of teaching and learning. We believe these principles challenge us to rethink our future as educators and open new avenues for collaboration as a community. Thank you very much for listening to our presentation, and we look forward to seeing you on Zoom.